Alright, I've done a little bit of Hades 2 coverage since it came out, talking about awesome aspects of the game and sharing some of my favorite moments, but so far I haven't really talked much about gameplay, and that's what I want to do today. I want to make some more gameplay focused videos, mainly about high fear challenges. Fear is how Hades 2 measures the difficulty added to the game by the different vows at the Oath of the Unseen, which are modifiers for different aspects of the game. I think that runs through the game with these altered modifiers and heightened difficulty are really awesome achievements, which is why I want to share some of them with you. Take them as entertainment, maybe as guides for your own runs, or perhaps a way to learn about slightly more complex play if you're newer to the game. And with that said, let's get going. Today, I bring to you one of the Testaments of Night, which are the in-game fear challenges, requiring the player to play with a certain level of fear and clear a specific boss to complete. Each of the 5 weapons in Hades 2 have 6 testaments, which ramp up in difficulty as you clear them. For a video, the only testaments that are really interesting are the final ones, since they're the ones that require you to actually get through the entirety of the underworld and beat Kronos. I'm definitely not going to make videos about all of the final testaments, but I at least want to bring you through one of them that I cleared with the highest fear value. Before that, it's the first thing we come across, so here's the Arcana card loadout I used, just for reference, though I'm not going to linger on that. I'll be using the Twin Blades for this run, which have the most difficult testament tied with Ignium at 24 fear, and I'll show you the setup I used to reach that benchmark. Rank 1 Blood, Dominance, Suffering, and Rank 2 Commotion, Haunting, and Wandering are the vows I've taken that affect enemies and encounters. For self-restrictions, I took Rank 2 Scars, the vows of Panic, Forsaking, and Bitterness, and Rank 2 Vow of Arrogance. Similar setups to this were used for all of the final testaments, and I'll explain a little bit about why these are the vows I choose as we venture through the underworld. But before that, as we descend into Erebus, equipment. The first thing, I'm using Chaos's Keepsake, which at rank 3 starts me with a random epic Chaos boon that changes to a different one every 8 encounters while I have the Keepsake. Yes, this is basically a gamble item, but the reason I take it is because epic Chaos boons give you ridiculous value. Case in point, the boon it started me with this time, which increases the damage of my specials by 102%, with no conditions or restrictions. That is overpowered, coming from a Keepsake. These boons aren't short-term either. This one will change because Erebus is longer than 8 encounters, but whatever effect you have when the Keepsake is removed, you keep for the rest of the run. And it's not like there are any bad Chaos boons. No matter what it ends up being, it's usually with a high statistic, like the example I just showed you, that can be made use of in some way or another. Now, before I continue, you can see I've dispatched the first 2 encounters pretty easily, and I'm already faced with a tough choice to make between a Gift of the Moon, a boon from Hestia, and a Chaos Gate, all of which can be very beneficial. I choose the Gift of the Moon here since they don't show up very often, and I tend to prioritize getting a Lunar Hex when I can, since they can be very powerful with the right upgrades on the Path of Stars. Just saying, if you happen to not prioritize Gifts of the Moon, I think that you probably should. Back to equipment, I use the Aspect of Pan on Limin Oros in most of my runs, which increases the number of projectiles that can be fired with the Omega Special and makes them home in on enemies in your cast, which you can see me making use of right here. Note that the Chaos boon I got pairs amazingly with this aspect, basically making these first 8 encounters completely free, yet another reason why I like the Chaos Keepsake. Sometimes you just get miracle combos like this, and it's freaking amazing. Anyways, time to choose the Lunar Hex. Lunar Ray is available, so I take it. I almost always take Lunar Ray when it's offered, for now just because it provides easily accessible high burst damage for the early bosses if I need it. The next encounter goes smoothly. The Oceanus enemies haven't really been causing me any problems, which is why I take the Vow of Wandering over just buffing the enemies more or something, since fighting them one region earlier doesn't really make them much more difficult to fight in my opinion. Similar thought process with the Vow of Haunting. Having to collect the little revenants that spit out everywhere is certainly annoying, but it doesn't affect how fighting the enemies actually goes, so it's one of my preferred vows to take at a higher rank. In the following room I find Nemesis, and I have to attack her in order to get the the reward. This is a bit of an annoying encounter because I'm pretty sure if you aren't able to deal the 1000 damage, you just don't get the item, but I have Aspect of Pan specials powered by a Chaos boon, which completely demolish the damage limit. Instead of the Centaur Heart I came in here for, I get a Gift of the Moon, which I didn't really want right now. I didn't even know that she swaps the rewards in this interaction until this moment. It never registered before. The more you know, I guess. Arachne is in the next room, and I grab the Emerald Dress, which I realize doesn't actually do anything for me because I'm already at full health, but oh well. The 50 shield is nice. I don't have any gold for Charon's shop, so I opt for the Root Stalker and manage to execute the most poorly timed Lunar Ray I've ever done. I really shouldn't be taking any damage from this thing, but I'm impatient. I just want to get in there and beat its ass. Anyways, I get my first actual boon from my victory, and I ended up picking Anvil Ring, which was newly reworked, because I figured I'd get some mileage out of it since I'll be slapping down my cast a lot for my specials anyways. And turns out it's quite solid, especially considering that 40% more enemies appear in encounters in this run because of the Vow of Commotion. It cracks shields and picks off the weaker spirits that I'm not directly focusing. Very helpful. The next few encounters, I just pick up resources and a Centaur Heart, and now it's finally time for my Chaos boon to change, and I literally got the exact same thing. I didn't even know that could happen. Anyways, Trove Trial Interlude.
This'll be over soon.
Motherfucker. I start taking a little bit of actual damage for the first time and get some extra magic, which I'll definitely be needing because of the Vow of Arrogance. Seriously guys, when you take this vow, do not underestimate the value of a large magic pool. Depending on what kind of luck you have, you can easily end up with 100 or 150 primed magic when you start scooping up a bunch of epic boons, and you do not want to get your entire magic bar primed. It is miserable. The final room before the first boss with our free reward is a choice between Charon and a Daedalus Hammer. I will always choose the Daedalus Hammer. Daedalus Hammers are the best. Trust in the Daedalus Hammers and you will have success. Final Slice is one of my go-to hammer upgrades, so that's what I use here. The 300% damage steroid on the last hit is always going to give solid DPS, and it gives Limin Oros a brutal AoE attack, which is something they kinda miss out on in their base form. Now it's time for the first boss fight. Hecate almost never gives me any trouble, although I say that and then this happens. I don't know what the f I was trying to do here. My goddamn synapses imploded or something. Regardless, I have 3 very big sources of damage, my Omega Specials, beefed up attack combo, and a Lunar Ray, so the fight should be pretty short. And yeah, it's not too bad, although... oh, jeez, don't look at that. The only other hit I ended up taking in the fight was from one of the summoned witch spirits, though I still took a fairly significant amount of damage because of that first hit being boosted by the Vow of Suffering. Other than that, though, pretty clean fight, the Aspect of Pan really putting in the work. We can take a quick break in the fountain room between regions now. It's time to change my keepsake, and I switch out Chaos's keepsake for Moonbeam. I also buy a Spark of Ixion to spawn a Chaos Gate at the entrance to Oceanus. If you couldn't already tell, I really groove with Chaos. And, I mean, for good reason. The boons it can offer you are crazy good. All of the ones I got here are solid, and honestly, I think the reduced magic usage effect might be one of the best standalone buffs in the game. I think it's awesome at any rate. I end up picking the extra HP here though because I'm kinda squishy this run so far, and I don't mess with no Inferno bombs if I can help it. Anyways, about the keepsake choice, because this is part of the strategy I usually go with in my underworld attempts. Moonbeam, Seleni's keepsake. Why that one? Well, Lunar Ray, our Hex, can be a powerful asset as we make our way deeper into the underworld. But in order for it to scale well, I need to upgrade it, and that's what the keepsake is for. The only upgrade I care about is Prominence, one of the Sublime quality upgrades. The keepsake ensures that only a single gift of the moon is needed to reach Sublime upgrades on the path of stars, and also increases the chance of them appearing, which is useful since sometimes they can be hard to come by. So that's why I take take it, to basically guarantee I get what I want out of the hex. Also, while I'm talking about this, I've continually made the mistake of keeping this item on me across regions if I happen to not get a Gift of the Moon quickly, assuming that you only get the extra upgrade points if Malinois has it on her. That happens in this attempt, small spoiler. Please note that this is not how it works. You get the points for the next Gift of the Moon you get after equipping the item, regardless of if you have it on you or not. Be smart, guys. Question the world around you. Don't be like me. Moving on from that, you can see my choice in Hammer upgrade already putting in a lot of work. I really am just a fan of how much more space it allows that big final attack to cover. It just makes dealing with large groups of enemies much easier, and in smaller engagements, apart from doing a ton of damage, it also lets the final strike connect with opponents that are further apart with the same hit, which is a factor that comes in handy more than you might think. I decide to go for the shop here just to see what I can buy with my coins. Apollo's Blessing is for sale, so I buy it, and it has Lucid Gain available. I hadn't used it before in a run, so that's why I hesitated a little bit, but magic boons are usually fairly important, and this might be the only one I find in a while, so I take it. I also grab the Pomegranate Slice and not the heal, which I can tell you that I immediately kicked myself for going into this next encounter. I only actually get hit a couple of times, but I'm looking rather disheveled, down to half HP, but I complete the encounter and get my mandatory onion, which I didn't mention at the beginning of the run, even though it's the very first thing that happened, my starting God Blessing being turned into this next to useless onion. That comes from the Vow of Bitterness, which turns the first God Blessing in each region into an onion. I take it because it adds 3 fear, but isn't really that big of an issue on its own. It removes 4 boons over the course of a run, because, 4 regions, but usually there's more than enough boons to go around regardless, like this next one I get immediately from Narcissus. Zeus's attack boon is available, and it's really not my favorite, but I don't like the other ones here for this situation, and I don't already have an attack boon, so I take it. In the next room, you can see the vows I took for encounters starting to become a bit of an issue, with so many of the pinheads spawning, revenants flying all over the place that I have to collect, and then the armored Lamia just being annoying to deal with the steam traps everywhere, and the Oceanus locations just generally being pretty small. I take a few hits, but thankfully am provided with a buffer as the Chaos boon I took comes into effect, both substantially increasing my HP and freeing up my special to be used without hurting myself. And with that, we're already through Oceanus, and with the free Hermes boon giving me epic greater evasion with a 20% dodge chance, I'm feeling pretty good going into Scylla's fight, although that 60 primed magic that I now have is starting to look a little gnarly. The fight starts, and I'm able to get a nice chunk of damage right off the bat. I focus Roxy before moving on to the other sirens like I usually do. This is my preferred way to deal with these gals. Dodging her area attacks usually isn't too bad, but they're by far the most movement limiting attacks of the sirens, especially in phase 2 of the fight, so I always try to take her out first. With Pan Specials just being OP and the Zeus attack boon synergizing decently with Final Slice, I make pretty quick work of her, and that's fortunate because I was tripping balls during this fight. Like, my movement was sloppy, and I kinda just stood there and took the damage like a bozo a couple of times. Lost almost 60 health, which really is not ideal. This must have been a late night run that I did because, seriously, I can see my brain buffering as some of these attacks come at me. I was not operating at full capacity. Anyways, the oversized clam woman falls in the end, and I go on my merry way. Like I mentioned earlier, I did a goof here in the space between regions and kept Seleni's keepsake, which again, you don't need to do unless you just want to keep the higher chance for Gifts of the Moon to spawn, but generally I would just take another keepsake with a more useful effect. At least a Gift of the Moon did show up immediately, along with a Daedalus hammer in the first encounter in the Fields of Morning. I like this region more than Oceanus, honestly. Having so much space to move around in makes the fighting a lot more fun, and in some cases, more forgiving. I guess the main problem with this area is that now the Tartarus enemies can spawn, most of which can be rather obnoxious to deal with. Not a problem so far though, and claiming the Daedalus hammer, I take 40% faster special channeling so that I can deal that big Pan special burst damage more quickly. Anvil Ring is once again putting in some good work. Look at that. So satisfying. Here's the one hit that I took in this location, jumping straight into a Lycaon like a total goober, and then flawlessly taking out the rest of the squadron that came after me. That's not annoying at all. Anyways, I can upgrade through the Path of Stars again, and here I can show you what I meant earlier by only needing one Gift of the Moon to get the Sublime upgrades when you have the effect of Moonbeam active. You can see that 7 upgrades are needed to get to prominence in this case, the upgrade that I want to use, and I believe that the number of upgrades needed to reach one of Sublime quality is always either 6 or 7, which is significant. That's because the minimum number of upgrade points you can get when collecting a Gift of the Moon is 3, making the minimum number of points we can get with the Keepsakes effect 7 at rank 2 and 8 at rank 3, making it so that we always have at least the minimum amount necessary. I got some points already from the encounter with Nemesis earlier, so the Keepsake wasn't needed in this case, but if this was the only gift that we found, it would have been. Instead, this time I just get to grab a couple of extra upgrades for Lunare, which never hurts. In the next location, I get some extra HP and magic, sustaining some hits in the process. The strong shielded enemies are really starting to stack up, and it's really hard to avoid all of their attacks. Situations where the game really starts getting intense like this are the moments where I really wish I had and was good at using a controller, because the keyboard only lets you go in 8 directions with WASD, which badly limits finer movement control, and therefore the ability to dodge around things that are going to hurt you. And that really isn't great when movement control is probably the most important mechanical aspect of this game. Regardless, I'm stuck with what I've got, so I take my shabby movement and run up on these 4 meatheads with it, all for a goddamn onion, which really doesn't inspire my most incredible performance, but I get the job done and claim my hard-earned reward. For the next room, I choose the mini-boss encounter, the other option being to go talk to Echo, which I've been opting not to do more and more recently. I guess that I just value the standard rewards more than the buffs that she gives you. Unfortunately, in the room that I chose, we got the annoying mini-boss. In the grand scheme of things, the Phantom still isn't too bad, but his vacuum attack and claw strikes healing him make him a lot more threatening than the Queen Lamia in my experience, which is the other mini-boss in the Fields of Morning. I get through the battle without any real issues though. Seriously, my one tip is just make sure you don't let him suck you, and you'll be fine against this guy. I grab my reward, and Demeter offers some useful boons to me with this blessing. Obviously, I go with Ice Flourish to bump up the damage of my specials even more. The next encounter brings me a Palm of Power with some chunks bitten out of Malinois for good measure. I run into Nemesis again, and this time she wants to hit Mel, and I mean, who can blame her? I do the same thing. Melly sure does have a fine, face. She sure has a fine face. Nemesis offers a 32 damage strike for a Mega Centaur heart, which is pure profit. Obviously, I take it. Here's some schmoves for you guys, flexing my battle prowess. Ignore the fact that I cut out me getting hit for 40 damage at the start of the encounter. Phew, you can really see it. Even at less than half of the maximum fear that the game has to offer, it's getting tough. We've almost made it through the Fields of Morning, taking a final stop at Charon's shop before facing off against Cerberus. I managed to gather over 750 coins in that last room alone. I have no idea how that happened. But, well, I'm rich. I snag everything from Charon, getting some health back and receiving a nice cast boon from Zeus to combo with Anvil Ring, which I then level up for a 3rd time. And now it's time to face off with the big dog himself.
I know you're angry. Believe me, so am I.
Jesus Christ. Well, there's the vow of suffering for you. 72 damage, good lord. Well, that's about as bad a start to a boss fight that you can get, so it can't go downhill too much from here. You can see why I wanted to upgrade Lunare as we go through this fight. Just let it charge up, and one press of a button for nearly 1400 damage over its duration. Not too bad for an ability that you barely have to think about using. It all goes pretty smooth until I somehow manage to do this, and get clipped by 2 of Cerberus's fireball explosions at the same time, exhausting my first Death Defiance charge, and then I beat him within the next 20 seconds with no further issue. I'll have you know, I'm pissed. He hit me in only 2 instances, but god damn it, those hits hurt, man. Anyways, whatever, it's fine. 2 Death Defiance charges still left. At the entrance to Tartarus, I switch my keepsake over to the trusty Knucklebones. This is my go-to keepsake for fighting Kronos. Deals a sizable chunk of damage to him at the start of the fight, and reduces some of his own damage. I like it. Right away, Tartarus starts off with a bunch of my least favorite enemies, Shield Satyrs. I decimate them, kinda like everything else. I think I must admit I got rather lucky this run. On top of my Chaos Boon re-rolling into the same thing and getting Final Slice, I also got a pretty solid cast combo as well. It's just so much damage. I clear up the encounter with no damage taken, and find Hades' room right away. He's looking dejected as always, but still parts with a little bit of his power to help us on his way. I take Last Gasp for this run, since I already activated Death Defiance once, so I'll already have some of the extra damage from this boon helping me out a little bit. The next room is full of the little hourglass enemies, also more satyrs. The encounter isn't very long though, so just a couple of hits from the balls and I'm out of there. Now, these encounters are some of my least favorites. You might ask, what does these encounters mean? And it means encounters with numbskulls. I hate these things. They teleport away every time you hit them, and when there's 20 of them all trying to eat your face at once, it becomes a lot to keep track of. They don't do a lot of damage, but it still adds up over the course of a fight. Next encounter, there's more of them. Awesome. Seriously, like, can you stop being a bitch and fight me? Fight me, man. Award for most annoying enemy in this game probably goes to these bastards for me, and I barely even know why. They really just bring out the mage in me. Anyways, not much else happens. I delete the Satyr Wizards and Numbskulls that come with the second wave of enemies. And man, look at that delayed hit on the final slice there. That is weirdly satisfying to me. Why is that satisfying? Final room before Kronos, and it's filled with a bunch more meatheads. These kinds of enemies really are way easier to deal with than the weaker swarm enemies, at least when they're not shielded, just way less to focus on. Melting through like 4 big enemies all at once is a cool feeling too. Look at me weave between those 2 spears while fighting these other enemies. I'm so good at this game. That was not just luck. I finish off the last satyr and make my exit, and here we are at Charon's final shop before the big boss fight. I've got some money to spend, so I take the extra magic, no-brainer, and see if Apollo has something nice for me. 3 epics is pretty nice, and I grab Prominence Flare to make my casts even stronger. Getting some of my health back is the last step, and we're looking pretty good for Kronos. 262 HP with 2 Death Defiance charges remaining isn't bad at all, although look at that 100 primed magic. I told you that the Vow of Arrogance packs a punch. Now for the final battle. I could break down the Kronos fight, but it's easily the most complex boss fight in the game, and I don't know if people really care about that, so instead, I think I'm just gonna let it play. Let's finish this.
That trinket peddler, crudely hawking his ill-gotten wares to his very limited base of customers, and hoarding so much gold I generously wrought. A noble ally that you have. Numerous as grains of sand. answer my call. Returned from worse, suffered much worse than from the likes of you.
And that's that. It felt like a bit of a scrappy fight to me, but I didn't even need to use Death Defiance again, so I can't really complain too much. That'll about wrap it up though. Before finishing here, I am curious about if people like watching full runs of the game like this. It was a bit of an experimental type of video for me. Longer, fully scripted ones focusing on gameplay are a little out of the norm for me, and it's something I would like to expand into a little more, and not only for Hades 2. Should I have broken down aspects of the fights and combat in a more detailed manner like a guide would? Should I have let more of the gameplay play out on its own, or less of it? I want to know what you think about how this video was and could have been put together, and any feedback would be appreciated. That's everything for today though. 24 Fear completed. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.